Are you all sitting comfortably? I do hope so, because you could be here for quite a while. I welcome you all very warmly to Presbytery this evening, to members of the Presbytery of Stirling, to representatives from congregations throughout the Presbytery, and to all who are joining us online. Tonight's meeting will be one of very great significance for this Presbytery and all the congregations within it. It is a meeting that will bring anxiety to many, and sadly a degree of pain for some, and we acknowledge that. Tonight there are nettles to be grasped and tough decisions to be made. And we've made tough decisions before, but not, I suspect, on quite such a scale as we were expected to do this evening, or at least for a very long time. These are challenging times, and not simply for churches, but for many people. And yet it is precisely because these are such challenging times that the church has to draw on all its reserves of faith, imagination, and diversity of gifts. If ever there was a time for adopting a bunker mentality, that time is most certainly not now. It is precisely because these are such tough and testing times for many who wonder how they will heat their homes and feed their families this coming winter, that the church can and indeed should look about how we reach out into our communities in solidarity, with support, love, and warmth. And what, I ask, does it say to people who are struggling to heat their own home to a degree that is safe if we heat buildings for an hour a week for sometimes half a dozen people? What does that say about where the church's priorities lie? Perhaps if we reach out to our communities in a time of need such as this, people might think again about the Christ whose love motivates us, and see a church not concerned simply with its own survival, but concerned about the world in which it is called to serve. A tough and challenging evening does lie ahead of us in what is, I believe, a kairos moment, a time of God's choosing for something potentially life-transforming and new, when God breaks in surprising and new ways. So let us worship God, not simply as the formality with which meetings such as this open, but out of our heartfelt need of the guiding and the grace of God. And let us sing hymn 192, All My Hope on God is Founded. Let us listen for the word of God as it is contained in the book of Joshua, chapter 1, and reading from verse 1. A time in the life of a people, the people of God, who were standing on the threshold of something challenging, new, and rich in potential. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, "My servant Moses is dead. Now proceed to cross the Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the Israelites. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and the Lebanon, as far as the great river and the river Euphrates, and all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea in the west, shall be your territory. No one shall be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall put this people in possession of the land that I swore to their ancestors to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to act in accordance with all the law that my servant Moses commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, so that you may be successful wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart out of your mouth. You shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to act in accordance with all that is written in it. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall be successful. I hereby command you, be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." In 1929, the former Free Church of Scotland and the Auld Kirk of Scotland united to form the Church of Scotland. This was a reunion of parts of the church which had split during the previous century and more. And yet, while the denominations reunited, their congregations did not. And the result was a massive increase in the number of charges and buildings over the actual missionary requirements each had previously thought necessary. And so, the Unions and Readjustments Committee of the Church of Scotland was formed at that time, 1929, to rationalise the situation. The legacy of this is still with us, with the problem being more urgent, and several other problems have made themselves felt too. The pitiful lack of financial strength, the frightening state of repair of many buildings, and the manpower situation, or the people power situation. This has manifested itself in three ways. First, there are not enough full-time servants of the church. Second, the available ministers are badly distributed. Many areas have many ministers and others have none or but one. And third, the ministry is aging. The average age is nearly 60, and nearly 2/3 of today's ministers will be retired in the next few years. No, this is not a rerun of Stuart Sharp's excellent address to the Conference on Mission Planning held here in this church back in June. They're the words of a predecessor of mine in Dunblane, the Reverend Jim Miller, writing in the Cathedral magazine about his work as convener of the Unions and Readjustments Committee of the General Assembly. Back in October 1986, 3 years before I was ordained. Exactly the same problems now face us, but magnified to the nth degree. You may well be able to understand the bewildered observation of one overseas Christian who said, "I do not understand the church in the United Kingdom. It seems to have the engine of a lawnmower and the brakes of a juggernaut, more to hold us back than to propel us forward." Yes, the draft Presbytery mission plan that we have before us this evening makes for challenging, even disturbing reading. But while some of us may regard it as a document denoting failure and even folly, I would like to suggest that it is in fact a document marked by realism and indeed faithfulness. Faithfulness in doing what is indeed necessary and which should have been tackled years ago. This is not an easy plan for any of us to contemplate, for all of us are going to have to work differently, to face new challenges and forge new partnerships. My word to you tonight is don't give up. Don't despair, particularly now. Keep going and keep your focus. Meditate upon the word God gave you day and night. It is easy, so easy for the church to be diverted, especially if it believes it is fighting for its survival. In any discussions that take place, any deliberation about what lies ahead, the challenge is this: keep Christ at the center of things. And remember that the one we are charged to preach and proclaim is Christ, this word Saviour. The mission in which we are ultimately engaged is that of Christ. The message that we should seek to help people grasp is that their lives, however mixed up or compromised, are precious to Christ and capable of being transformed. The societies that are in so many ways complex and even downright dysfunctional are capable of so much more. The way we seek is not my way or your way or even the committee's way, but that of Christ, the way of grace and truth and love. Keep your nerve and maintain your focus. And remember that as God's people in this place, you are precious. Knowing that the church at Philippi was having a tough time, St. Paul began his letter to them with a strong note of encouragement. I thank my God every time I remember you. In all my prayers for you, I always pray with joy because of your partnership in the gospel from the first day until now. Being confident of this, that he who began a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ. I thank God for you. The committee, in the course of its work, has been humbled and has been deeply aware of the hard work, the commitment, and the sheer determination of many of our congregations. Paul appreciated the Christians at Philippi, and he wanted them to know it. And Presbytery would want you to know that tonight too. Encouragement and appreciation is oxygen to the soul. He knows that people will face challenges and keep on going if they are affirmed and encouraged. Although I regret to say some will find bits of this report not encouraging. But they're not meant to be discouraging, they are challenging. One of the saddest conversations I recall having was with a group of boys in a school for those with behavioural difficulties. And I'd been chaplain to some of the highest achieving schools in Scotland, but I retain a particularly soft spot for that particular school. Nowhere else did any pupil say to me, "Don't worry if you lock yourself out of your car, Mr. Rennick. We'll have you back in it in seconds." But on this occasion, they were facing exams for the very first time in the school's history, their standard grades. And one of them asked why they were sitting the exams in the first place. Is it, he said, to prove we're thick and useless? It was hard work to break through that barrier, following a lifetime of being put down in one way or another. And as we contemplate a plan and a narrative that may seem to be saying to us that we have failed, and in some ways we all have, I hope we're able to read it in terms of an indication that we are all capable under God's Spirit of new achievements, new advances, new avenues of serving and bearing witness, new ways of being the people of God, who can learn to do things differently, learn to trust their neighbours as never before, the neighbours we've sometimes largely ignored for years. We are capable of ceasing from a debilitating spirit of competition, capable of sharing our resources and our experiences excitingly and perhaps as never before. This presbytery will later this evening be voting on its mission plan, and we're required to have one. Not to agree a plan really is not an option. I'm sure Stuart would have me stress that. We're in this together, each and every one of us. Alone we can do little, so little. Together we can actually do so much. So wrote Helen Keller, a woman who overcame her lack of hearing and sight by, among other things, developing an outstanding capacity to cooperate with others and with God. Let us pray. Come, Holy Spirit of God, come, and breathe into your people gathered here the wind of new life, the wind that scatters the mists of tired habit and reveals vistas yet unseen. Let the fire of love descend upon us, the fire that purifies our desires and rekindles our faith and love of you, our God, the God who will guide us through change and chance. Come, Holy Spirit, come. Help us to hear one another with openness and respect, and help us to hear one voice above all others, that still small voice of God that says, I am with you always. I will never leave you or forsake you. Come, follow me. I have come that you might have life, life in all its abundance. Lift our gaze above all our fears, that we may see Christ in the beauty of his holiness. Help us to seek above all other things the kingdom of God in our midst, and to seek what Christ has come to do, to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives, recovery of sight to the blind, and to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of our Lord's favour. And we pray for those of our number who are not here, especially those who are ill, thinking of Dan Harper and his congregation at Bridge of Allen and his family. We pray for the people of Ukraine still living in the midst of conflict, and we pray for peace in their country. And we pray for the people of Pakistan, counting the cost of flooding and wondering how they will recover, having lost so much. Let the world respond with generosity and concern, and let us all live more carefully in the face of a changing climate that brings new challenges, often to those who are already vulnerable and poor. Guide and bless us now as we meet as a presbytery. Direct all our thinking, our speaking, and our seeking, and let us work for the coming of your kingdom and the showing forth to a hurting world that God is indeed love. Through Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. Apologies? Clark?
Moderator, I was saying this, we're at the door as people came into the church this evening, and the apologies are as per today's list. Thank you. Moderator, now it's working. The Stirling lists were by the door as people came into church this evening, and members of Presbytery were invited to sign them. Can I please ask those who did not do so to make sure they do so as they leave this evening, so we have a true record of all who are present as members and corresponding members of the Presbytery. The apologies are as per the Stirling sheets.
Thank you. In which case we move on to the minutes of the meeting, first of the 16th of June 2022. I'm taking these as read. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Is that an accurate minute? And goodness knows how long the minute of this meeting is going to be. Moving on then to the meeting of the 16th of June, when we met by Zoom. Page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think I've gone back over minutes here. Okay, 23rd of June, if that's an accurate minute. 23rd of June for the induction of Mike Goodison. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay. The meeting of Saturday the 25th of June, which is the conference here in Park Church. Page 1, page 2. And finally, the meeting of the 12th of July in Dunblane Cathedral for the ordination of the Reverend Alistair Munro. Page 1 and page 2. Is that an accurate minute? Thank you. This will be potentially a long and demanding meeting, so I'm going to confine my remarks simply to welcoming Alistair Munro to membership of this presbytery following his ordination on the 12th of July. Alistair, you are welcome, not only in Dunblane, but Kilmadock and Kincardine and Menteith, but also in this presbytery. You're already demonstrating something of the necessity and the sheer value of ordained local ministers within the changing landscape of the Church of Scotland, and we're grateful for all that you are bringing to us. Alistair, welcome. And is this first meeting since Mike Goodison's induction, Clerk? So in which case, can we offer a very warm welcome to Mike Goodison as well, and welcome him to Menstrie and to this presbytery. Welcome, Mike. It was a very joyous occasion, the night of your induction, and one of great anticipation and hope. So we're pleased to have you in our midst, along with your Doug. Moving on, role of presbytery. Clerk?
No business, moderator.
Thank you. Order of business?
As in the print.
Okay, moving on swiftly. Treasurer's report. Mr. Dunsmore.
Moderator, my report circulated provides an update on our predicted spend compared to budget for this year. Since I last reported in May, there is a small reduction in forecast expenditure of £195. Details of this movement and comparisons of spend against budget within individual areas are itemised within the report. The net increase in expenditure predicted for the year means that the sum required to be met from reserves is £3,620 compared to the budgeted contribution of £3,000. I have delivered this in two parts, Moderator.
Okay.
No questions there?
Any questions?
No.
Stunned into silence.
Presbytery receives the report.
Agreed.
And secondly, Presbytery notes the current financial projection of income and expenditure for 2022 and the resultant increase in the contribution required from reserves from £3,000 to £3,620.
Agreed. Okay. Business Committee, Balrose.
Moderator, my report has gone out in print, but there's one addition and one amendment to make, so I'll go through the report. A separate report is presented after this initial one of the Business Committee on the transition group for the new Presbytery of Perth, so I'll take that as separate after my delivery of this report. The new allocation of members to committees has been sent out. Please check your name and which committee that you have been allocated. This is the last iteration of the committee structure in its present form, but is nonetheless important. The work of committees does not stop as we merge into the new presbytery. And in this last third of the year, as we see the formation of the new committee structure taking place, it is an opportunity for each committee to reflect on what is important in their remits and what to take forward into the new presbytery. So please take part in your committees, get in touch with your conveners, and contribute to this new transition period of the new presbytery. An addition to the report is the fact that at the September meeting we usually appoint the panel of tellers for presbytery meetings. This may be important for tonight's meeting, so therefore I bring before you this evening a list of tellers, which are Dan Gunn, Ian McVean, Graham Nash, David Russell and Edna Stewart. And I ask Presbytery's approval of those names.
Is that agreed? You may be busy tonight. Okay, thank you.
And the change to the Business Committee report is that the future Presbytery meeting, which is the ordination of Ruth Kennedy as Pioneer Minister, will actually take place in Dunblane the Cathedral rather than Dunblane St Blaines. The Reverend Alistair Munro will assist the moderator.
Okay.
Moderator, I have deliverance in 3 now, because we've already approved the panel of tellers, but in 3 parts.
Are there any questions for the convener? Okay, Maggie. Could you please come to a microphone?
Moderator, I'm Maggie Roderick, locum at Stocking Coles Norton, but here tonight as a member of Presbytery in my own right. I'd like to ask the business convener through yourself, if possible please, where Ruth is going to be serving, because I think it's absolutely fantastic that we've, an ordained local minister recently, and Ruth is now going to be ordained. But I'm asking, is it in Dunblane? And if the answer to that is yes, why?
Okay, yes, please. Yeah.
Stuart Sharp, wearing my other hat today as ministry's person for students and stuff. That hat. At the end of this cohort of probationers' time, because there were so few presbytery plans processed, there was a shortage of opportunity. The General Assembly approved a programme of developing short projects that they could be involved in, lasting up to a year and a half. We developed 6 outlines and invited the 2 probationers who were infected by them to see if there was any one that caught their eye or caught their fancy. One of our probationers is now not with us. They're up in Shetland, so there's been a murder. So she's not our responsibility. But Ruth is still part of Stirling Presbytery, still with us, and she chose to do a pioneering project in the Dunblane area across all the denominations in Dunblane with the under 40s that lasts a year and a half. Does that answer your question? Yeah?
Moderator, that answers my question. Is it appropriate to make a comment now, or do you want to take other questions?
I'd prefer to take other questions if I could. Any other questions? In which case, comment, please, Maggie.
Thank you, Moderator. I think, yes, it's fantastic that, I know the stress that probationers have felt under, and it's fantastic that Ruth has found something she really wants to do. I think it would be remiss not to point out that, bearing in mind the sensitivity of what we're discussing tonight, bearing in mind that the congregations of Dunblane and Lecropt and Kilmadock and the other one that I can't remember,
Kincardine and
Menteith, actually are still having a substantial ministry presence where other people and the mission in other areas and the need for work under 40s in the other areas is absolutely crucial. And I just can't believe that yet another ministry post that we have is going to Dunblane, and wonder what on earth somewhere like Alloa, which when it unites, I'm told will be an area of multiple deprivation, is having no extra ministry whatsoever. And in fact, the whole Greater Alloa group is losing a minister. So I'm just a tad disappointed that that's not been shared out elsewhere.
Could I just add factual information? I'm careful about this because I'm a minister in Dunblane and also in the chair. But Dunblane has already had a cut of one minister in its plan. In the previous plan, Dunblane Cathedral was regarded by the Presbytery as a two-minister charge, and that is no longer the case. And indeed, as well as being a one-minister charge, down from a two-minister charge, it's taking on responsibility for two other parishes. So there is a reduction in the Dunblane area. I'm very conscious of the fact that there are needs all over the Presbytery. But this is, as I say, there already has been a reduction in Dunblane. Yeah?
We want to make it clear that this was Ruth's choice. We shaped these projects around various ones across the whole area, and in one of our meetings in the cathedral, folk were asked to come, if they come up with a project outline, to tell us, and we'll firm it up and offer it out. And some folk did, and they were offered. Ruth lives in Aberfoyle. It's a heck of a long way each day to Alloa from Aberfoyle and back. So we have to also shape these projects around where the probationer or former probationer is situated. So that was why Ruth, she picked that particular project, which lasts for a year and a half and is centrally funded and does not take any part of our ministry allocation in any way, shape or form. Just to be clear.
Thank you, Stuart. Val?
Deliverance 2 notes the Presbytery notes the membership of committees.
Okay, noted.
And the third one notes the date of ordination of Ruth Kennedy.
Okay.
And we have already approved the panel of tellers.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Moderator. I'll go on to the report of the transition group for the new Presbytery of Perth. As the year progresses, the work of the transition group is intensifying. The new presbytery will come into being on the 1st of January 2023. And this report is an update that's being given to all 5 presbyteries at their September meetings. And it seeks agreement of the 5 existing presbyteries for steps which have to be taken before the end of the year. So hence this report. The perhaps most exciting element of the report is that we interviewed applicants for the post of Presbytery Clerk, and we are delighted to announce that the Reverend Dr. John Ferguson, currently Minister of Petticoat and Clerk to the Presbytery of Aberdeen and Shetland, has been appointed by a unanimous decision. And this is a significant step forward, and we are very fortunate to appoint someone of considerable ability and wide experience in the parish, the presbytery and the formation of the new Aberdeen and Shetland Presbytery and National Church. It is a proposal that Dr. Ferguson takes up his appointment on November the 1st, 2022. There is much ongoing work in amalgamating the committees of presbyteries. And each group has been asked by the transition group to consider a possible remit for their area of work to ensure that everything is covered and duplication is avoided. The group has spent some time considering the best ways to devolve decision-making to smaller groups while not undermining the role of full presbytery. We've contacted clerks from other presbyteries to find out what others have been doing, especially the new presbyteries. And currently, the General Assembly in May approved the Church Courts Act, which contains a section on delegation of authority. The concern of the group is that the new structure can run smoothly while ensuring proper scrutiny of decisions. This applies as well in the broader sense to explore the possibility of having a smaller group of trustees for presbytery rather than every member being a trustee as it currently is. This is not as straightforward as you might think, and contact has been made with the principal clerk and other presbytery clerks to consider what can be done in future legislation. Office accommodation has to be secured in advance of the start of the new presbytery, and the transition group is seeking powers from the 5 presbyteries to agree a rental and sign a rental agreement on behalf of the new presbytery. And this we would do in conjunction with the finance team consisting of the present conveners and treasurers. So there are 2 other areas that the transition group is seeking powers this evening. The Business Committee Pro Tem. Until the new presbytery meets, there will be no business committee, which can only be formed once the conveners are appointed by the new presbytery. The transition group, therefore, is asking presbyteries to agree that it will act as a pro tem business committee until such time as the new one can be formed. And lastly, a moderator for 2023 has to be appointed, and the transition group has been considering the best way of doing this. And therefore we are asking that each presbytery nominate one of their number and submit that name to the group by the end of September, and give the transition group powers to select a moderator designate from the 5 nominees. Moderator, I have deliverance in 7 parts.
Okay, any questions for the convener? In which case?
First of all, presbytery receives a report.
Accepted.
Secondly, presbytery welcomes the appointment of the Reverend Dr. John Ferguson as clerk for the new Presbytery of Perth.
Agreed.
Thirdly, presbytery agrees that Dr. Ferguson would take up appointment on November the 1st, 2022.
Agreed.
Number 4, presbytery delegates powers to the transition group in consultation with the finance team to enter into a leasing agreement for offices for the new presbytery.
Agreed.
Presbytery agrees to nominate one of its members to be considered as a possible moderator of the new Presbytery of Perth for 2023. That name to be submitted to the transition group by the end of September 2022.
Is that agreed?
Presbytery agrees that powers be given to the transition group to nominate a moderator designate selected from names submitted in accordance with Deliverance 5.
Agreed.
And lastly, agrees that the transition group be given powers pro tem to act as a temporary business committee until the presbytery can meet and appoint conveners and office bearers.
Is that agreed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. In which case we move on to the Oversight Committee and Dan Gunn.
Moderator Dan Gunn, convener of Oversight. This is just an attempt to cheer up all the session clerks here tonight. There will be a final attestation of records for the Presbytery of Stirling in November. The venue will be Bannockburn Allen Church Hall. The date will be announced in due course.
Otherwise known as the final reckoning, is it?
I couldn't possibly comment. My deliverances are in just one part.
Okay, any questions? Okay, session clerk, contain your joy. Dan?
Presbytery receives this report.
Is that received? Thank you. And moving then on to Stewardship Committee, Ian McVean.
Moderator, my report has been circulated. I wish to add one sentence to section 4. If you have a valid EPC, send it done in the last 5 years, send it to the stewardship convener. And I've already given it to the clerk.
Okay, accepted. It's an amendment. Okay.
I have deliverances in 7 parts. 1. Presbytery receives a report. Presbytery affirms the decision of Tillicoultry Kirk Session to sell only the manse and the immediate grounds in which it stands, enclosed by the wall between the manse and the orchard, and any fences and walls bordering the remainder of the garden.
Maggie?
Moderator Maggie Roderick, it's a very simple question. I don't see anything in that report that says that Tillicoultry are thinking of replacing the manse, and I recognise that we've previously given the Minister permission to vacate the manse because of the energy costs, etc. And the second part of my question is therefore, what precedent are we setting?
Ian? It was a question pertaining to plans to purchase another manse, and if not, whether a precedent was being set. I think that's a fair summary.
We have given permission to the Minister at Tillicoultry to live in Stirling. When the manse is sold, the money will go into a fabric fund for the purchase of a new manse.
Okay.
Presbytery approves retention of the community garden at Tillicoultry Parish Church.
Agreed.
Presbytery instructs the Presbytery Clerk to advise the General Trustees of these 2 decisions at Tillicoultry Parish Church.
Agreed.
Presbytery approves the allocation of the retained reserve of the Presbytery allowance and instructs the Presbytery Clerk to send an extract minute with the letter.
Agreed.
Presbytery instructs all congregations with a manse to carry out a domestic electrical installation certificate survey and send a copy to the stewardship convener by 31st October 2022.
Is that agreed?
Presbytery instructs all congregations with a manse to carry out an energy performance certificate survey and send a copy to the stewardship convener. I wish to add, if moderator, if they already had one done, just send it instead of carrying out the survey.
Okay. This is not an energy performance certificate survey for the occupant of the manse, is it?
No.
Good.
No.
Okay.
That's all.
Thank you very much indeed. Report is as a whole received. Right. In which case we move on to the ad hoc committee to revise the Presbytery plan, which is the reason that some people are here tonight, and it is the big item of business before us. So before we do that, can I ask that we engage in a moment or two of quiet prayer, and then if you take your hymn book and turn to hymn 620, and we shall sing it unaccompanied. Spirit of the living God, move among us all. Let us keep quiet. Spirit of the living God, move amongst us all. Make us one in heart and mind. Make us one in love. Humble, caring, selfless, sharing, Spirit of the living God, fill our lives with love. And let, O God, our song be our prayer. Amen. Stuart Sharp.
Stuart Sharp, temporary convener of the ad hoc committee, and one who wishes that Dan was in better health. Normally, I would just stand up here and do it off the cuff. But that would be disrespectful of the seriousness of the issue before us. In presenting the mission plan on behalf of the ad hoc committee, I do so knowing the weight, the impact of the proposals within the plan. There will not be a single parish unaffected to some degree by its content. We know and have heard the concerns of many about what the future holds. So we do not present this matter lightly or flippantly. At the same time, we also feel it's a time for straight talking, even if what needs to be said and acknowledged is uncomfortable and unpalatable. As this impacts every congregation within the bounds of Presbytery, I hope we can all take it as read that we all have an interest in the plan and its impact, and as such, assume that those interests are all declared. We recognise that the building estate we have is an inheritance from previous generations, which served the church well in the past. But we are not a historic preservation society. That's the job of Historic Environment Scotland. Those who established these buildings did so for a purpose, to serve the needs and the mission of the church. And when they were built, they were new. They had no history. They had no backstory. They did it to provide a place for people to worship, for people to be prepared, equipped for the mission of God. A space where all that can happen. But if we think the needs of the church and the mission of God are the same now as they were then, we are sorely mistaken. I cannot imagine many of us who would gladly return to the days of a single coal fire to heat a house, single glazing, outside toilets, no insulation, Needs and expectations have evolved in regard to our housing. Should they not also do so with regard to our church buildings? Should they not be as comfortable as possible? Helps people nod off a bit easier. Should they not be as efficient to heat as they can be, especially given the present situation? Wait for the impact of the next set of energy bills to hit the church. Some may never open their doors again. Should our churches not be equipped to connect to modern means of communication easily and readily? Moreover, to have one of our largest assets and cost centres open one day a week, and even then only for a few hours, is not maximising its use. Our buildings must be shaped to serve the mission of the church each and every day, not to have the mission of the church limited by the buildings we currently have. Anomalies of the past history of the church, which we all know and have been reminded of today, should have been addressed decades ago, and they must be resolved. To have buildings adjacent to one another is unnecessary and unhelpful. It reasserts the motif of competition to the community that surrounds it. To have church buildings in rural areas separated from its population base because that's the bit of land the owner granted to the church no longer meets the needs we face. With ageing and less mobile population, as well as being removed from the perception of other generations who pass by it. What does it say? What does it do? We know that had this matter been dealt with 70 years ago or more, it would have been hard enough then. And now we have all these additional years of history and personal story of individuals and families, all the celebrations of life, and all the mournings of loss that have taken place within those walls, makes this even harder. But the clear message from the national church is that such matters must now be dealt with. It's nettle-grabbing time. And I know in such times there's a desire and a need to blame somebody else. Congregations blame Presbytery. But are we not those congregations? Every single one of us represents a congregation. Presbytery blames the national church. But are we not the national church? And send delegates to assembly and have people sit on the committees and councils of the church. In essence, and at all levels, we're just blaming ourselves. There are presbyters here that are representatives of congregations who were delegates to the 2021 General Assembly and passed the Presbytery Mission Plan Act. Over and above buildings, we have to face the stark reality of reduced ministry numbers. 45 congregations to be served by 21.5 ministers, many already in linkages, and that 21.5 being a 40% reduction on our previous allocation of ministry. The proposals to move link charges to unions and those being linked towards further unions in the future is an attempt to reduce the administrative responsibility on ministers so that more time is actually given to ministry and not administration. Where new linkages are being formed, we have sought to make them logical within the locality and reflecting the preferences of the congregations involved. But we recognise that for many serving in rural areas, the geographic spread of some proposed charges is large, even if population is modest. We have also sought to create partnerships that can afford the full cost of ministry they receive. And in 2019 statistics in the Red Book, only 11 congregations in this presbytery met the full cost of ministry. Many of the linked charges combined were managing to meet that, assuming a 50-50 split, but not all of them. We know that the forthcoming move to the Giving to Grow scheme, away from mission and ministry, is going to link congregations more clearly to the ministry they receive. And we have sought to shape the congregations in such a way as to sustain that. All of these and many more issues we as a committee have had to wrestle with and seek to navigate a path through conflicting demands. We know that the implementation of the plan is a completely other issue. Where there is scope and opportunity to implement elements once the plan is ratified, we will be able to proceed. However, we know the elephant in the room is the issue of tenure. The Act does allow for ministers in unrestricted tenure to take that with them if they are prepared to engage in the process of change. If, for whatever reason, they do not wish to do so, then adjustment in those areas can only happen when tenure is no longer the active issue. It has to be said, though, that this does not hinder sessions and the representatives of congregations having discussions about the future, making plans, even reaching outline agreements that can be implemented at the right time. None of that impacts the rights of the incumbent and is clearly permitted under the terms of the Act. As we present our plan, I close with this. We stand at the fork in a road. Two paths lie before us. We can continue to walk the path of contraction and decline and keep on that road until there is no Church of Scotland left. There will always be the Church of Jesus Christ. We are not the sole owner of that copyright. He will prevail. He will triumph. Or we can choose a harder road. I believe it can be the road of expansion, where we see where we are actually at, acknowledge the reality, and for every single member of our faith communities to get involved in fulfilling our Lord's command to his church, his whole church, to go and make disciples, to share the gospel and build the kingdom. This is not just the work of those in ministry, because I'll let you into a secret. We were never trained for that either. What worked in the past doesn't today. We are all learning as we go. We can no longer sit and expect people to come to us. We are not the only show in town. This path looks less certain, a bit rougher to travel. But it is the only one where there is life for those who walk it. The ultimate question is, which path will we take? Moderator, I move the report in the name of the ad hoc committee and lay the Presbytery mission plan on the table for adoption by Presbytery.
Thank you very much indeed, Stuart. Before we go any further, could I give one or two guidelines and also extend a very warm welcome to representatives of congregations who've been cited to appear in the interest of their respective congregations. Representatives of the congregations may, if they wish, speak on behalf of their own congregation once. If you wish to speak, please come to the lectern at the front and confine your remarks to 5 minutes if at all possible. And the clerk has brought his bell, which he will ring, and we hope that that will be the only time we hear it tonight. There will also be a roving mic available for members of Presbytery who wish to speak and who find it difficult to get to the lectern. Congregational reps have been invited tonight, and I would hate us to go away, or people to go away saying they never got the chance to speak. So each congregational rep is welcome to speak, but don't feel you have to. And I say that in all sincerity and respect. If you're in agreement with the proposals for your own particular area, you don't need to stand up and tell us. We'll take your silence as assent. And your restraint in not speaking will be regarded with gratitude by the whole presbytery, and not simply as a lack of interest or engagement. And presbyters are always welcome to ask questions for clarification or information from the convener. But once again, may I remind you that they're not the excuse for a speech. Questions finish with a question mark and are generally brief. Only members of Presbytery will be enabled to vote, or allowed to vote, not other congregational representatives. And a number of people have given notice of amendments to the draft plan, which we will respect. We found that helpful, and we will call on those people to speak at the appropriate point. But however, lest anybody goes away feeling unacknowledged or unable to give them the chance to speak, I will go through the list, and if anybody desperately wants to speak, please do so. But as I say, if you agree in principle, it might be better if you did restrain. We may have to stop for a comfort break or cocoa or something in due course, but I hope we'll be able to move as reasonably as we can, but not in a way that in any way undermines the business at hand and its importance. So we have representatives from Aberfoyle, Alloa Ludgate, and I know we have a motion from there. Alloa St Mungo's, and we have a motion from there. Alva, Balfron, Balchwider, who are unable to send a representative tonight, I think, but are watching online. Oh, sorry, do apologise. It's Cullen and Arjonig who are not. Bannockburn Allen, Bannockburn Ladywell, Bridge of Allen, Buchanan, Bucklivy, Callender, Cambusbarron Bruce Memorial, Clackmannan, Cowie and Pleen, Dollar, Drimmen, Dunblane Cathedral, Dunblane St Blaine's, Falin, Fintry, Gargunnock, Gartmore, Glendevon, Killern, Killin and Arjonig. As I say, we have apologies from them tonight, but they are watching online. Kilmadock, Kincardinum and Teeth, Kippen, Leckropt, Logie, Menstrie. I have a notice from Logie that somebody will be speaking there. Menstrie, Muckert, Norriston, Portamonteith, Sochi and Colesnorton, Stirling Church of the Holy Rood, Stirling North, and I have a notice of motion in the name of Scott McInnes. I don't know whether that's pertaining to Stirling North or elsewhere, but Scott will be invited to speak. Stirling Park, Stirling St Mark's, Stirling St Ninian's Old, Stirling Viewfield Erskine, and I gather somebody wishes to speak there. Strathblane, Tillycootry, and Tullybody St Serves. And we welcome representatives of all these congregations. And as I say, if you wish to speak, you are welcome to do so. If you have nothing that you feel you can add to the debate, that's absolutely fine with us. And questions are always in order. Okay. We have two deliverances. Do you want us to we'll deal with them first? Or amendments, rather? Okay. Congregational representatives, do you wish to speak? Right, feel free. And could you identify yourself and the congregation you represent? Right, do you want to come up to the lectern and speak, please? And try not to break any limbs on the way. Thank you.
Moderator Linda Cantley, Session Clerk of Callender Kirk. I'm actually pleased to say tonight that the Kirk session view positively a uniting of Callander, Aberfoyle and Balquidder churches. We would also view positively a merger or uniting with Killin and Ardionig. However, we would hope that further ministerial support would be offered, particularly where pastoral care is concerned, given the scale, geographical coverage and the many communities involved. At this time, the Kirk session are less inclined to see a much larger parish grouping with the Carse churches. Where the proposed closure of Trossachs Church is concerned, the Kirk session wish to put a request before Presbytery that more time be given to consult with those members who attend Trossachs. This would allow them to consider all the options that may be possible to protect the future of Trossachs Church. That's all I have.
Thank you very much indeed. That's helpful. Stuart, do you want to respond to any of these or just now, or we'll take note of them? And this is a process. A decision has to be made tonight, but it's a decision to embark on a process.
Just a general point on building closures. The plan states that there is no deadline put on them beyond the 5 years from the date of ratification. So we're not saying once this is approved, these buildings are shut tomorrow. We recognise there's a process to go through, and there is time within the plan, and that's been addressed in the way we've tried to shape that. So there's no rush to that, although we would hope that steady and persistent progress would be maintained toward the end of that. I think when it comes to the larger area around Callander, we recognise that initial suggestions of moving Killin and Ardrionig into the Breadalbane, but the other side of the boundary, wasn't the preferred option. So we recognise that that's an area we'd probably want to look at again during the course of the year. We hear what you're saying, I think is the best we could say just now, and if we were able to supplement that, we would probably wish so to do. But if we don't have the resource, we're in a position where we can't. But we recognise the circumstances there.
Thank you, Stuart. Yes, could you come up and... I think that's an answer that... This is a question, yes.
Moderator Jeff McCormick, Callander. With regards to closure of buildings, my understanding is that when the Presbytery has an approved mission plan, the Presbytery is unlikely thereafter to see an approval of expenditure on a building. I would be grateful if the convener could outline for me how we move beyond not approving expenditure in a building that is not identified for retention to closure.
Thank you. Convener or Clark? Thank you, Jeff.
As the period between identifying as no longer essential and formal sale or closure is quite elastic, the provisions for the maintenance of a building still exist as a duty with the trustees, but those responsibilities are really, we would reckon it limited to wind, watertight and safe. So you meet your statutory requirements for electrical testing, all the rest of that. You keep it wind and watertight. But if they were to come back and say, we want to strip out all our pews and put in fancy seats, I think the answer to that would be negative. So there is still provision to maintain a building to the point of sale because we are responsible for it.
Thank you. Okay, congregational reps, any other people wish to speak? Yes, 1, 2, if you want to start making your way forward, it will speed us up. Alison? Form an orderly queue. Alison, okay. Okay.
Moderator. Alison Granger, Minister at Flynn. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee for their time and diligence. I understand how difficult it's been. Our session and myself, we prepared what we believe to be an acceptable proposal to present to Presbytery tonight. And in that original proposal, it was clear to all that losing our church was not something we were okay with. We spoke about the shared vision, shared by the session and members of the church and our community. And it is to make our church a place where the light and love of Christ shines out like a beacon of light. This was the vision we had, a beacon of light in the dark times we're living through. We also touched on the effects of 2 years of COVID to our income and obviously to everybody else's income and to our social gatherings. And we would ask that Presbytery give us 2 years, not one, to come up with different plans. And we already have plans to install accessible toilets in both our buildings to make them more usable, although our hall is extremely well used and other groups are just waiting for these upgraded toilets in order to rent our space. The Presbytery mission plan sets out the idea of linking with Cowie and Pleen, and we are very happy to go along with that part of the plan. But our hall currently struggles on a Sunday when we have cafe church, when we have 60 plus attending, then we are pretty much full. So it's not big enough for many more. We also made the point that Flynn understand the desire to be financially independent, and we have a team that is willing to work hard at that. We've got 7 new elders, 3 of them, the oldest of whom is 23. Church buildings, we believe, are important in isolated parishes. In our culture, buildings are known to be where God's people worship, and they declare the presence of God for everyone to see in a powerful and symbolic way of an enduring Christian presence in a society that more than ever needs to see the way of Jesus. And we have in Flynn lots of ideas to be working on. We have a vision uniting us. We have the support of the community. And I had all this planned for you, and then I gave my son this speech to read. And he asked some simple questions. Where's God in all of this? Where is your faith? Who do you serve? What does closing all these churches say to Scotland? That the church is retreating? That the church is giving up, failing, dying? Is that the message you want to give to Scotland? And he talked, my son talked to me about the widow of Zarephath, where God commanded her and she gave the last of what she had to feed Elijah, and the jar of flour was not spent. Neither did the jug of oil become empty, according to the word of the Lord. And then he said, has Jesus not promised that he'll build his church? And the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So why are you running so scared because your finances are in difficulty? Can you not learn how to live by faith? To trust the God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills? So do we believe in our own circumstances, or can we, like the widow, trust more that God will provide? Because it is easy to simply react to what is physically facing us. But as Christians, we're asked to look spiritually at what we're facing and trust God. The widow trusted God and she was blessed. You see, God saw beyond what her mind could comprehend and what her eyes could see. He saw the whole of her life when she could only see the moment. Selling off churches is not a preparation for revival. It is a declaration of defeat. And we may well be in the middle of a drought, or even in a battle, or simply being tested, But we need to believe that God will provide. Instead of calling for buildings to be closed and ministers to be reduced, we should be calling for the people of God to persevere in prayer for revival. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. It says in the Bible, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. Well, there's more than 2 or 3 of us gathered here tonight. Faith begins where man's power ends. Let's all have faith that revival is coming.
Thank you, Alison. May I remind you that there's 1 speaker per congregation just now. Okay? Any others? Yours?
Tricia Cumming, the delegate speaking this evening on behalf of the Kirk Sessions and congregations of the linked parishes of Bucclivie and Gartmore. We acknowledge the difficulty and challenge of the task facing the Presbytery Planning Group. However, I have been asked to express our disappointment, sadness, and indeed frustration that the viable and alternative plan for our area churches, which was endorsed by both congregations and presented to the group in May, was neither acknowledged or responded to. A request for a follow-up meeting was also not taken up. To us, it appears that the wishes of our 2 congregations have not been considered, and they're finding that hard to accept. There is genuine concern and sadness that the plan as set out leaves our 2 churches in a precarious position for the future. From a mission point of view, how will the 2 communities see a cut of 0.5 to the ministerial support in the area? How will the minister allocate his time between that on a 0.5 post? And there's also the financial costs, which are of concern also to us, because how does that 0.5 charge sustain the cost of running 2 churches, the fuel costs, and everything else associated? So I've been asked to speak, moderator, on these points.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Next.
Meg Duckworth, Session Clerk, Fintry Kirk. Church buildings which are historically listed will, according to the General Trustees report, inevitably require significant sums for upkeep and maintenance until disposal. This is a generalised statement which does not apply to all church buildings. When a church is closed by the Presbytery, the trustees of that church are responsible for all the costs until the church is sold. But often they can't even use the building. Why should our congregation be forced to rent alternative premises when we have a building which meets all the high standards of the quinquennial survey report commissioned by the Church of Scotland, which was carried out by Adams Napier Partnership in December 2021. All the work has been completed. The Church of Scotland knows the obvious difficulties of selling some churches. Ours is completely surrounded by a graveyard with 350 graves and active graves. There are people in our village who are going to be buried in the graveyard. It's sometimes difficult to sell a church like that. At Fintry Kirk, we pay our way. We do not cost the Presbytery or the Church of Scotland money. Our church is not a burden to the Church of Scotland or our parish. The General Assembly's Mission Plan Act requires each presbytery to have a mission plan approved by the Forum and the General Trustees in place no later than the 31st of December 2022. Is the head presbytery hell-bent? Now that's the dictionary definition of that word, is recklessly determined in going to any length to ensure this Presbytery Mission Plan 2022 is approved tonight, in a rush to meet the deadline in the legislation passed by the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland. This indecent haste was clear during the conduct of the asset management building audit carried out at Fintry Church on the 2nd of May. The conduct of members of the audit team was deemed aggressive and dictatorial, and explanations were dismissed. When the AMA report was eventually provided, we didn't recognise many of the answers. The report is littered with inaccuracies. The maths, logic and linkages are erratic and inconsistent. There were numerous instances where questions were asked and answered, but not scored. The mission plan concludes Fintry Kirk is no longer seen as being fit for purpose or meeting the demands of the congregation and should be disposed of. This decision appears to be largely based on the results of the asset management building audit. We understand that this audit toolkit will not be used by at least one presbytery as they deem it inadequate for the task. The audit team, Stirling Presbytery of 121 George Street, know very little about Fintry Kirk or our work and the mission both in the local community, further afield in Scotland, as well as overseas, particularly in Africa. They never asked. But even more concerning is there is nothing in the Presbytery Mission Plan which we are discussing tonight, outlining and detailing the review appeals process open to all Kirk sessions. Kirk sessions were told they could register their disagreement with the proposals following the meeting on the 25th of June, when they were invited to reflect on the plan and submit any further comments to the committee by the 15th of August 2022. This time around, we have been told bluntly, this version of the mission plan will be the one presented to Presbytery for approval. But the review appeals procedure is clearly detailed in the Presbytery Mission Plan Act 8, 2021, as amended by Acts 7 and 12, 2022, and passed by the General Assembly of the Church of Scotland in May 2021. Section 3.1 of the Act states that within 14 days of a presbytery meeting, it shall be open to any Kirk session. Are we 1 minute?
Right, okay.
Any Kirk session within its boundary to seek a review of the process used by the presbytery in preparing and approving the mission plan. Why were details of the review procedure not included in the Presbytery Mission Plan, draft plan, or the Presbytery Mission Plan, revised draft plan? Why did the Presbytery fail to comply with the letter and the spirit of the Act? Was this a serious oversight or a conscious decision? How did the Presbytery plan to rectify this situation? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Stuart, do you want to respond?
It was not an oversight, it was not an omission, it was not trying to trick anybody. The Act was sent out for everybody to read. There is a review process. The ad hoc committee was given the remit of coming up with a plan, not the review process. The review process is laid out in print, and any congregation, as has rightly been pointed out, can apply to the review process through the legal courts of the church, through the office of the clerk. It's as simple as that. And I would contest some of the comments that have been made, particularly about Fintry. There is no toilet. In the church. No, it's in a separate building. You have no disabled access. You have no disabled access. You have no on-street parking. You have no fire exit. There are serious issues with the building. So to try and make out that everything is hunky-dory is not accurate. The quinquennial inspection is not there to establish standards. It is there simply to assess the current condition of a building to ensure that it is safe. They are two very different things. You raise the point that you bear no cost. Looking at the 2019 Red Book, which assesses your mission and ministry contribution as 22,000, if I remember rightly, the cost of half a minister in 2019 was 22.5. So you are a cost to the church. So I just have to challenge some of the statements that have been made. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You were wishing to speak? Yes. Okay. No, when they feel led. I think it's beyond me to do it in alphabetical order, Gary, or any other order.
Alison Bruce, charged with representing the parish of Buchanan and the community of Buchanan Parish. In Buchanan's response to the Stirling Presbytery Mission Plan, we list 25 valid reasons why Buchanan Church deserves to survive as a sacred place of worship and as a venue at the heart of our small rural community. I hope that the ad hoc committee has carefully considered all these points and has them before them now. My dilemma in deciding which of these 25 valid reasons I should highlight tonight is this: I have been guided by the congregation and the community at large, who have both prioritised the same points to bring to the attention of the committee. We all recognise the difficulties in which the Church of Scotland finds itself. We understand that the 6 congregations in the Strathendrick area cannot continue to operate as they have been doing, since for one reason or another, the larger church is unable to fund and to provide a minister for each parish in the group. However, we do not accept that the only solution is to sell off or demolish 2 of these rural churches. We are more than willing to discuss linkages and sharing resources of every kind, as we have done successfully for years with our sister church in Drimmen. What neither the congregation nor the community are prepared to do is to lose our church building. Sadly, Scotland is littered with aged, large stone churches which have fallen into disrepair and which are a constant drain on the resources of their dwindling congregations and 121 George Street. Huge roofs need repair. Stained glass windows need replaced, as do inefficient heating systems, not to mention dangerous steeples. I could go on at length, and all of them costing a fortune to maintain. In reply to our submission, the Reverend Stuart Sharp wrote, and I quote, "At no time was the financial position of the Church of Scotland considered." At no time was the financial situation of the Church of Scotland considered. No wonder the Church of Scotland is in straitened circumstances. In Buchanan Church, you have a small architectural gem of a building in perfect repair with an extremely healthy bank balance, regularly attended not only by a faithful local congregation, but by parishioners from other local churches who like our traditional form of service, and who together not only cover all our ministerial and fabric expenses, but contribute generally to the wider church and a range of other charities. This is the church that you have decided to demolish or to sell. On reading the Presbytery's assessment of the 6 churches in the Strathendrick group, it is clear that the cart was put before the horse. It was clearly decided from the start that Buchanan Church should go, and then the assessor set about marking the churches in such a way that ensured that a rural church like Buchanan was bound to fall short of the pointage which is required to qualify for survival. No points, therefore, for a church hall, although we have one. No points for a stair lift, although we only have a single-storey church. No points for a health and safety officer, no points for having LED lighting, no points for mains gas, therefore no points for a gas certificate, no points for emergency lighting, no marks for a Legionella test report, etc., etc. Were these points ever raised at a quinquennial meeting? On the plus side, no points for our many weddings, christenings and funerals, no points for the speakers who have been invited to address the congregation on a variety of subjects, no points for the charitable schemes we run, no points for the fruit, flowers and vegetables which we distribute among the community, no points for the concerts which have been held in the church, no points for coffees, teas and home baking provided after special services, no points for over 50 years of wholehearted and happy collaboration with our linked church, Drimmen. We have a petition with 500 signatures opposing the closure of Buchanan Parish Church. There has been a place of Christian worship in Buchanan Parish since the 8th century, and this generation is not going to be the one that abandons it. We hope for compromise, but we'll keep our church as a place of Christian worship with or without the help of the Church of Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Jan? Could we let the representative speak first?
Yeah, it's pertaining to what might be said by other representatives. It's a very quick question.
Okay, very quickly, Maggie.
You can hear me, you can repeat it. What is the actual cost of ministry, not just for a parish having its minister, but the actual cost for ministry within the Church of Scotland that includes the presbytery costs, the mission costs and everything else, please?
What is the cost of a minister within the church, including the presbytery costs?
Of a parish that we should be putting into ministry, please?
Ian is probably the best person to answer the question.
The cost of providing a minister to a single charge, whether it be linked or not, is $50,000 a year in ministry and mission costs. On top of that, a charge will have to pay for the manse costs, the travelling costs of a minister, telephone, etc. So you can add a further $10,000 to that in cost to a parish or a charge. So that is costs. And on top of that, you have presbytery dues, a congregation will pay as well to the running of presbytery. So there's quite a bit of expenditure to a charge. Many congregations cannot meet their dues. We have only 11 churches, 11 charges can pay their full ministry and ministry in this presbytery.
Thank you, Ian.
Moderator, that's not the question I asked. I asked the question. I think this is really important, moderator, because we are being told by people that, oh, we're self-sufficient. We're not a Congregationalist church, we're Church of Scotland. And I would like to know, does anyone have the actual figure, which I seem to remember was about 64,000 when I was training a long time ago. So what's the figure that covers World Mission, it covers the Church of Scotland nationally, as well as presbytery, not just the cost of providing a minister, because we're not congregations. That's the figure I would like.
I think Ian has got very close to that answer of 60,000 plus. Yes? Okay. Jan, we're taking congregational representatives rather than members of presbytery just now. Are you wanting your congregational representative to speak?
Moderator, I would just like to know at what point, sorry for my ignorance, will we have...
Sorry, you're mirroring mine.
At what point will we have amendments?
We'll come to them when congregational reps have had the chance to speak. We will be taking amendments. Okay, Alistair.
Moderator, Jim Miller, Kilmartin Parish Church. On behalf of Kilmartin Parish Church, I thank Presbytery for allowing me to address you tonight. Can I also thank the Ad Hoc Committee for its prompt answer to my last letter to the committee. The first Presbytery plan stated that Kilmartin Parish Church should be sold, let or closed within 5 years and the church hall upgraded as a place of work and worship. In our letter, we stated that the Kirk Session would prefer to upgrade the church, which scored exactly the same as the church hall on the building's audit study. And we also asked for a 3-year window to carry out a feasibility study. Given that we had some grace till the end of a 5-year period, we thought the request of a 3-year window to carry out the feasibility study was not unreasonable. The ad hoc committee has now stated that the feasibility study has to be completed within 1 year of the approved Presbytery mission plan, and that at that time we should submit a fully funded proposal of what we propose to do. I think that I would appreciate an explanation as to why the difficult task has been imposed on Kilmarnock Parish Church in the time frame indicated. We would wish to have the 3 years, as requested, reinstated. I sent a previous letter to the ad hoc committee dated the 24th of May, expressing the concerns of the Kirk Session regarding the discrepancies between the proposals submitted by the Greater Alloa Group to the ad hoc committee and those of the ad hoc committee in the Presbytery mission plan. Further, using the statistics issued by the ad hoc committee, I highlighted the comparison of the congregational roll and number of funerals in the remaining 3 individual churches in the Greater Alloa area with the linked charge of Sauchie and Snotton and Kilmarnock, which are as follows. Tullibuddy St Serse, 325 on the congregational roll. Alloa Ludgate, 283. Alloa St Mungo's, 319. Sauchie and Kilsnotton linked with Kilmarnock, 743. Funerals, Tullibuddy St Serse, 21. Alloa Ludgate, 11. Alloa St Mungo's, 17. The link charge of Sauchie and Kilsnotton with Kilmarnock, 42. I asked the ad hoc committee in the letter if this was an equitable allocation of the 4 FTs in the group. I'm sad to report that this letter has been left unanswered. Like some of the delegates before, all the Presbytery Conference, the Reverend Stuart Sharp explained that the next biggest expenditure after ministry and mission was fabric and the upkeep of old churches. Following the conference, I sent an inquiry to the General Trustees asking what happens if the church buildings is not sold or let. The answer was that it was still incumbent on the congregation to keep the building in a wind and watertight condition. If this scenario prevails, then I do not see the sense of closing the building, as the congregation still has the cost of maintaining an empty building. There is also a double whammy. If the church building is not being used, there is an increase in the insurance premium and the cover is reduced. I thank you.
Thank you for that.
A general comment on the timeframes that we set within the plan. We have sought to, where we feel it's appropriate, to compromise and to engage with congregations, to give them a bit more time to come back with a firmed up proposal. How detailed that needs to be is probably a matter of debate and question. A feasibility study can simply say, here is our proposal, here is our broad costings, and at least if it's worked out clearly and adequately, that can be done in a year, we believe. We're also under the pressure that we wish to see things moving forward. And if we give 2 years, 3 years, will it be then 4 years and 5 years, and we're at the end of the plan? So the proposal of bringing that forward in the way that it has been is to encourage activity, encourage engagement. Come back within that period and say, here's the progress so far. Perhaps we need a little more time. Then I'm sure we would consider that. But at the moment, we need to see folk taking on board what we're asking them to do. And we feel that we have listened to what Clackmannan has said, that there was a very clear sense of a plan and a shape for their set of buildings. And we would welcome seeing that just fleshed out and shaped up to see how it would meet the mission of the church.
Thank you, Stuart. Any other congregational representatives who are not members of the Presbytery wishing to speak? And I know, Jan, you've also wished to speak alongside your representative. So would you like to come forward now from Logie? Well, we'll do that later in the... Well, you can alert us to it, but it'll be voted on later when we're dealing with amendments. Okay? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
My previous charge had a population base of 17,000. I was doing 40-odd funerals a year, every year, for 18 years. Other congregations sitting right next to me were doing a lot less. Unfortunately, that's the nature of parish ministry. We recognise our demand, whether you agree with it or not, that's the case. I can give you the list of every funeral I have ever done, over 870 in my time as a minister. That's part of the job. Is it an equitable distribution? We feel it's the best allocation of the resources we had available. Obviously, people who are at the front end of that are going to disagree. But that's the view that the committee took.
Okay, Jan, is Alistair wishing to speak as well?
Thank you, Moderator. Moderator, members of the Presbytery, I would like to, well, I'm not sure about these things, but to move an amendment, and then later, I suppose, we'll vote on that. Moderator, in a recently published article titled "The 5 Marks of Mission, Ministry Planning and the Future of the Church," Dr. Liam Fraser makes the following statement. He says, "We will only have missional churches if we have healthy congregations. Any criteria used in planning must be sophisticated and nuanced enough to pick up not only missional activity, but congregational health. Otherwise, the church may be felling its healthiest congregations, ending up with a basket of summer fruit that will wither finally in the autumn chill." Moderator, even if it was the case that the Logie Church building did not play a role in our mission, it certainly does play a role in the overall health of the congregation of Logie. We will obviously be engaging in future visioning and planning, but the absence of a space of worship as we have at the moment will certainly be have a detrimental impact on the well-being of a thriving, healthy, and worshipping congregation. Moderator, I ask our member of our session to speak, move the amendment on our behalf.
Moderator, on behalf of Logie Kirk, we seek an amendment to the revised draft mission plan to change the building categorisation of Logie Kirk from B with an asterisk to A, and to delete the paragraph specific to Logie Kirk on page 34. Moderator, I would begin by stressing that the Kirk session gets the first section of plan. We understand the problem in terms of resource restrictions and are fully supportive of a proposed and logical solution in terms of allocation of ministers. But we were and remain shocked by the proposal to close our church building and reallocate services to our halls, as was the reaction of one of the Assembly trustees who came to witness a service last Sunday. By way of background, our halls are located in Causeway Head, about 2 miles north of here, and the church is located about a mile beyond in an idyllic semi-rural setting at the start of the Oakle Hills. We are so excited and recognise ourselves so fortunate to have a new minister in Jan Steen, who was inducted on a 7-year reviewable tenure basis in February this year, since when we have had 6 households join the congregation. Moderator, we seek the amendment for 3 reasons. Firstly, it is a solution to a problem which does not exist. At the Helpful Conference in June, the convener explained the overarching rationale for closing buildings is that some buildings which have been a blessing in the past have become a burden now. That makes sense, but it is not the case for us. Our church building remains a blessing. The reaction of the congregation and community to the proposal is testament to that. In terms of fabric, it has been a relatively problem-free building for decades, with average annual maintenance costs of a few £1,000s, only 2 or 3% of congregational income. The other purported problem is that our church is in the wrong place. But surely the most relevant criterion to judge that is whether people choose to go. And post-COVID, Sunday morning attendance has varied between 70 and 100. We are not suggesting the blessing-burden balance may never tip the other way in future. And we accept the position should be kept under review, but there is no problem now. Secondly, the proposed solution would create a problem. The halls provide vital accommodation for weekday activities of both congregation and community, but are complementary, not an alternative to the church. In simple logistics, the larger of the 2 halls has a maximum capacity of 100, and so would be fairly cramped for Sunday services currently, before allowing for special services such as Christmas and Easter, and would be unable to accommodate many weddings and most funerals. Our halls are fit for purpose, but utilitarian compared to our beautiful church with pipe organ. And the commodious car park at the church actually makes Logie more accessible than many town churches. But the biggest issue is that many members would simply stop coming. The church has no sale value, and it would just be too galling to know the building that we knew and loved and wanted to keep worshipping in was lying empty because of a pointless decision imposed on us, without anyone from the committee having discussed it with us or even talked to the minister. Thirdly, and briefly, Moderator, the 1-year stay of execution offered in the paragraph of the plan specific to Logie, with the burden of proof placed firmly in our court, doesn't work for us. In his covering email, the convener clarified that the committee is looking to see the church in regular, if not daily use, and adapted to meet multiple uses in the fulfilment of our mission. That doesn't work for us because our weekday activity largely takes place in the halls. The church is for services. As I said, the 2 buildings are complementary, but that's no different from other congregations. Why should Logie have a different requirement imposed simply because our church and halls are not adjacent?
Could I ask that you...
Moderator, as I'm not a member of Presbytery, I ask Jan to move the amendment.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And we'll do in due course. Do any other congregational representatives wish to speak? Speak now or forever hold your peace. And I don't want anybody to leave this. Somebody's beckoning over here. You speak just now, yes, let's do that, just get it. The problem is that when parties are removed, the visitors are removed from the debate, members of Presbytery can still speak, but those who are guests of Presbytery tonight will not be able to speak. So it's to give those who are guests of the Presbytery or visitors from congregations the chance to participate in the debate fairly and squarely. But
Gary
you're not denying anybody that opportunity, Gary. So
I'm speaking on behalf of the Kurt Session and the congregation of Lecropt. I think Logie have probably said a lot of what we could have said. So I simply want to make a few comments and then ask Stuart a question, if that's possible. I would say that Lecropt agree that mission is crucial to the future life of our denomination and also our congregations. And we thank the ad hoc committee for listening to the feedback we gave regarding the first version of the plan And we look forward to the year ahead to demonstrate to everyone how we use all of our resources for mission at Lecropt. We have a wee concern about the level of transparency in regard to the criteria being used by the committee, some of which we've heard from other people. And I want to ask a question, particularly about the daily use thing, Stuart, that's been mentioned a few times. Has that criteria been applied to every congregation, that their church building should be used daily?
Okay, Stuart.
I think the phrase was regular, if not daily. So regular is probably the default position that we are encouraging. The point is we need to move away from building set and aspect used once a week for a couple of hours and only once a week. And we need to see the resource that a space provides to facilitate mission. It needs to be a flexible space. Pews are not flexible. They do not yield to anybody's back or backside at times like this. We need to just reimagine how we use the spaces we have. And if we can come up with a viable plan that says, here is this space. Yes, it was like this. We have a vision to make it like this. And this is what it would bring in addition to our congregational life. Then the committee would engage with it wholeheartedly.
Thanks, Stuart, that's helpful. Just in regards to the concerns that some have in our congregation in cut session about transparency and the like, they have an appeal to make. Now, I was going to make an amendment, but I don't know if I should do it now. I'll let you can tell me. That basically, we would just ask for the ad hoc committee, or the Presbytery, should it approve the plan tonight, to help the congregation in cut session understand what being a well-appointed church actually is. Now, you've given some hints tonight. I think if Lecropt cut session had an actual specific, it needs this, and this, then that would go a long way to helping us in the next year, and may in fact reduce the need for a whole level of meetings, if you know what I mean. So I was going to propose an amendment just to say that at the beginning of the paragraph about Lecropt, that the Presbytery commits to helping the cut session and congregation understand the opinion of the committee. Do I propose that now, or is that?
Could you wait until later, please?
Okay, that's fine.
As we'll be going through the plan, we can take amendments at the relevant times. Do we have any other congregational representatives who are not members of Presbytery wishing to speak? If you wish to, could you please raise your hand? Nobody wishes to speak who's not a member of Presbytery. Okay. In which case, technically, the congregational representatives are removed from the meeting. Now, that doesn't mean you can go elsewhere. You're welcome to stay, obviously, but you will have the frustration of not being able to speak in the remainder of the debate, and, of course, not being able to vote. But I don't want anybody who's come here as a representative tonight who's not a member of Presbytery to go home saying, I was never allowed to speak. Please, speak now or forever hold your peace, as we used to say at weddings. Okay? Right. Any further questions for the convener from members of Presbytery? Does the convener wish to respond to any of the points that have been made by representatives, but not closing the debate? Just while it's fresh in your mind, if you wish.
No, we'll leave it. I think
right.
Issues
Okay.
will come out with the amendment.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Clark and I were debating whether we have a comfort break. I remember the General Assembly once spent 20 minutes deciding whether it would have a comfort break, by which time it was too late for many. Could I suggest that we have a comfort break and resume at 9:10? Are there enough toilets to accommodate that degree of urgency? Is this a well-equipped space? Okay, so we will resume at 9:10. Prompt. And the doors will be locked. Could I call the Presbytery to order, please? Five-minute rule still applies. Good, thank you. Yes, I've got some. Thank you very, very much. I trust you're all now more comfortable. We've reached the point in the evening whereby... Are you more comfortable now, Maggie? I'm so pleased. Could I say, we're reaching the point in the evening where representatives who are not members of Presbytery may no longer speak. We thank you for your presence and for your contribution and your engagement with it. Could we have a number of amendments, but before we take the amendments, could we indicate on voting? If a vote is clear, by a show of hands, the tellers will not be required. If it's one vote for and the rest against, or something blindingly clear, and the moderator can't get that one wrong, we will not count a vote, to not be wasting time. If the vote looks split and it's harder to determine which way it's going, there will be a count. And the vote on the final plan, the final vote on the plan will be a paper one. It will be a paper vote which will be counted. So the tellers have got a little bit of work ahead of them. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially 6 amendments. If anybody else, due notice has been given, if anybody else has an amendment they wish to make, could they please inform the clerk as soon as possible? Sorry, Gary, this is the one you mentioned about Le Cropt. It was included in my 5, and there may be also another amendment in the name of the convener, which picks up Clackmannan's question. Okay? In which case, could we take first of all the amendment that Scott McInnes sent in? Scott, could you come and speak, please?
Scott McInnes, Minister at Stirling North and Interim Moderator at Sauchie and Coles Naughton. Moderator and members of Presbytery, I want to begin by thanking the Acting Convener and all the members of the Ad Hoc Committee for the time and effort they have put into putting this plan together. Whatever reservations anyone here may have about the plan, I think we can all appreciate and give thanks for the time and effort that they have put into this. I do, however, want to propose a slight amendment to the plan on page 21. Currently, the 4th paragraph reads as follows. The implementation of the following allocation plan will be pursued as adjustment allows, but with a priority for those congregations which are currently vacant. It should be clearly understood that future tenure will be granted on a 7-year reviewable basis to maintain flexibility to implement the necessary changes to the composition and placement of ministry within the bounds. Moreover, it is recognised that the planned adjustments may require current parish boundaries to be adjusted to best serve the newly formed parishes, and each area grouping is invited to review their boundaries in collaboration and present any agreed changes to Presbytery. My proposed amendment would simply delete the second sentence of the paragraph regarding tenure. I have been corresponding with the acting convener about this, and I would like to thank him for the time he has taken to liaise with me. I think there are a number of reasons not to include this policy statement about reviewable tenure in our plan. Firstly, I'm concerned that this is not something that was included in the original draft that was circulated at the end of June. Kirk sessions have therefore not had the opportunity to comment on it, nor have presbyters had a great deal of time to think about and reflect upon such a policy. Secondly, I fear that it unnecessarily ties the hands of presbytery going forward. Whilst I believe that unrestricted tenure is not something to be given out lightly, I do think that there are some circumstances where it may be appropriate, particularly where presbytery is convinced that no further adjustment to a charge is required. This, many of you might remember, was the case when St Mark's became vacant just over 5 years ago. Also concerned that if all vacancies are on a reviewable basis, it will lead to uncertainty for congregations and for ministers at a time when perhaps stability is needed. In fact, with all of the uncertainty we've had in recent times, I think any stability we can give to congregations at this time will be a good thing. Fourthly, I think if this kind of approach is adopted nationally, it will make it harder for the Church of Scotland to attract and recruit ministers, exacerbating our current problems. If it is only adopted locally, then we in Stirling Presbytery may find it difficult to recruit ministers from and attract ministers to our own presbytery. And fifthly, I think that this approach will lead to increased stress for many ministers and congregations and will lead to an increased number of ministers being off on sick leave for significant periods of time. Again, this does the opposite of what we want to achieve. Finally, I believe that the place for this decision regarding tenure is one that should be made at a national level, and I do not think it makes sense for only one presbytery to take this approach. Ultimately, I'm concerned that there's quite a lot of dynamics regarding this policy that we as a presbytery have not had the chance to properly think through or weigh up. It is something that has appeared in the plan fairly late in the day, and for those reasons I think we should take it out just now, knowing that this is something we can revisit at any point in the future. Thank you, Moderator and Presbyters, for your time, and thanks once again to the Acting Convener.
Thank you, Stuart. Do you have a, Scott, do you have a seconder?
I don't have a seconder.
Second, thank you. Are there any questions to Scott about his, as well as the convener? Right.
Moderator, my question, I think, maybe is to the Presbytery Clerk rather than to Scott, as one of church law. When we talk about a 7-year reviewable basis, some people think that means that if somebody's put into a congregation just now, that they can remain there for 7 years. But am I correct in thinking that the Presbytery would then be able to give them 6 months' notice if they were on that basis?
I think I know the answer, but let the clerk respond in case I get it wrong.
The short answer is yes. The reality is that in most cases, a real charge is there so to allow presbytery flexibility in adjusting congregation circumstances, like things like parish boundaries, linkages or unions, which may prove to be necessary in the future as we move together as a church into that uncertain time, when we know there'll be fewer ministers even than there are now. Reviewable charge is not the same thing as terminable tenure used to be in the past. It's a way of allowing the presbytery that flexibility. By contrast, unrestricted tenure means that presbyteries cannot impose any further change to our charge without the written consent of a minister inducted on that tenure. It means that Presbytery's hands are tied with regard to potential future changes that may be necessary for the mission of the church, but where a minister resists that necessary change.
Thank you for that. Any further questions? Okay. If you can come to the front, please. If there are no further questions, I don't think there are. All right, Jim, could you we'll get your question in before a comment from Jeff. Sorry, Jeff.
Jim McNeill, our parish interim moderator, Clackmannan. It's just what standing would this have if this presbytery doesn't exist on the 1st of January 2023? If this presbytery agrees that all future vacancies in this area have to be 7-year reviewable, and the rest of Perth Presbytery, as it will be, has agreed not to do that, what standing does that have?
Okay, Stuart. If you're feeling bold enough, that's...
As of the 1st of January 2023, this presbytery no longer exists. Neither do the 5 component presbyteries. We all become part of Perth Presbytery. The 5 plans that we have are consolidated into a single plan, and that Presbytery of Perth, the new Presbytery of Perth, would have to approve the consolidated plan of the 5. So at that point, any inconsistencies in policy, I would assume, would be ironed out. I would not necessarily be involved in that process.
I
would not willingly be involved.
I think we would take your statement for what it's worth. Jeff, then. Is this a question, Maggie? In which case, can you come forward and ask it, because questions are not being... Sorry, Jeff, we really do love...
Moderator, it follows on from that answer. Do we have any idea what the other 4 presbyteries are putting in their plans? And do they have this clause in it?
Thank you.
I have not had sight of any of the other plans from the other component presbyteries. They are not in the position that we are in. They are not in, as far as I'm aware, they are not in the position of presenting their plans to their presbytery.
I think that's correct. Right, if there are no further questions, Jeff, third time lucky.
Thank you, Moderator. Jeff McCormick, Calendar. So, Moderator, leaving to one side the anecdotal reality, which we all know, which is that ministers move all the time. Indeed, I've been in Calendar for about 4 years now, and that makes me almost incredibly long-serving in Calendar in recent experience. The statistical evidence seems to have been over the years that actually, and this I know because I was on a General Assembly Commission that looked into these matters, the reality is that very few ministers stay in a charge for more than 7 years. They come and they go. That is the reality. Now, I appreciate that tenure does create elephants, and it would appear that I am an elephant, which is quite nice, because normally I'm regarded as a dinosaur. But nonetheless, I think the reality of the matter is that when we look at the facts are that ministers tend to move on fairly regularly. We don't actually need to tie our hands in this way and create difficulties for ourselves in recruitment and retention. Because if you think you're only there for a maximum of 7 years, you're going to be constantly thinking not just about where you're going to go to next, but where you need to be based, so that when the church decides that for reasons of the church's own mind, at fairly short notice, that it needs to relocate ministers, you need to relocate your family, you need to relocate your partner's work. What that does is to create a ministry that tends to move only within urbanized areas, so that the ministers don't have to move very far so that their families and their partners can maintain a continuity of life. And I don't think that's good for the church, and I'm sure it wouldn't be good for our presbytery.
Sorry? Sorry, it's not helpful when people shout out like this. If you please refrain. Okay. Convener? Sorry, somebody else wishing to speak? Peter, so I didn't see you.
Peter Murdoch, Session Clerk, Park Church. I would pray that all ministers be valued and treated with respect and consideration, irrespective of their tenure. If we are a presbytery that wants to keep and retain good ministers, then we've got to treat them fairly, irrespective of their legal tenure. And coming from the NHS, well, maybe that's a bad example, but some flexibility is always required, because the situation in some areas or some aspects may not be exactly the same in 7 years' time, and some adjustment or some modification may be in everybody's interests. You can't have two categories of ministers. One lot of ministers who could say nothing at all changes, even if all the people move out of my area or something else changes. That's not fair and equitable in this day and age. So I would ask both categories, all categories of ministers, to be treated with consideration and equal respect.
Thank you, Peter. Any further debate? Scott, you want to respond to the debate, and then the convener will close the debate. I'm
happy for that.
Okay.
Can I like to express my thanks to Scott for prior notice of his amendment and the conversation that we were able to engage in over the last day or so, just trying to explain each other's positions. On the issue of tenure as in the print, it's not a statement that reviewable is the only way things must be. Rather, the text indicates that this is to allow for structural adjustment to take place. Once that is done and accomplished, Presbytery can make any determination it wishes with regard to tenure. This adjustment on an area-by-area basis, not the whole plan, but by areas and sections, if an area is able to implement all the change that the plan foresees, then the issue of tenure is moot and full status can be awarded as Presbytery wishes so to do. What we are trying not to do is tie the hands of Presbytery. Any grant of full tenure more completely ties the hand of Presbytery. Once it's been granted, it can't be withdrawn or removed or adjusted. The plan, as it is presented, has a series of steps, and each are or have a constitutional element to them, and each of them would require the cooperation of the incumbent. If no such cooperation is forthcoming, we find ourselves unable to implement the change that we believe is necessary. A reviewable tenure position does not end automatically at the end of the period. Presbytery has the power to extend it by a year, 2 years, 5 years, for as long as it wants. What it says is that we will periodically review the tenure, the position, to make sure things are shaping up the way we wish them to shape up. It puts control into the hands of Presbytery, and for that reason I feel I have to resist the amendment in the name of Scott McInnes and reassert that the wording and the intention is that this action is only until implementation is achieved and as areas find their change come to fruit and be implemented, so the tenure in that area can also be reviewed and changed.
Thank you for that. Could we hear the amendment so we know exactly what we're voting on? Scott.
Yeah, so the amendment is to delete the sentence, the second sentence of the fourth paragraph on page 21. The sentence to be deleted reads, "It should be clearly understood that future tenure will be granted on a 7-year reviewable basis to maintain flexibility to implement the necessary changes to the composition and placement of the ministry within the bounds." I would also, for the sake of grammar, add in the word "moreover" from the subsequent sentence.
We're all for grammar. Thank you. Presbytery, clear what we're voting on. People voting for the amendment, please stand. For the amendment. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And voting against it and with the convener. I think, looking out, that the amendment falls. Thank you. And thank you, Scott. Moving on. Sorry? Well, we can count it if you want. It didn't look quite so close from here, but to me and the clerk. But right, those voting for the amendment, please stand. Sang, you're voting for it. You're not asking to speak. That's good. Tellers, please. All counted. And those voting against the amendment? Oh, sorry, you haven't. Sorry. My apologies. Now, those voting... Oh, you're still counting. That one vote counts, David. It could be the one that swings it. Those voting against the amendment and with the committee, the convener. No, I'm not voting. I'm just standing. They were voting for the amendment 17, against the amendment 31, so the amendment falls. And that's... Thank you. Apology accepted. Before it was demanded. In which case we now have amendments from St Mungo's and then Ludgate, both in Alloa. So St Mungo's first. First come, first serve. And could I remind you that the 5-minute rule still prevails? And the clerk is bell happy. Thank you.
Jenny Syme, Alloa, St Mungo's. Moderator, members of Presbytery. The positive amber score of 75% for St Mungo's puts the church building firmly in the green category. The consensus of St Mungo's session is that the decision to dispose of the building would set a dangerous precedent, disposing of a building solely on the amber score. St Mungo's is a vibrant and resilient church, as demonstrated during the last 12 years of our minister's tenure, especially during the COVID lockdowns. We have achieved concrete missional and financial landmarks in order to aid the ultimate vision of our church. After being overhauled in 2019 at the cost of £598,000, St Mungo's is in superb condition. St Mungo's is open 7 days a week. Since reopening 15 months ago following lockdown, we have been open 335 days. And contrary to rumour, funerals are available any day of the week. In the 18 months since opening, the community cafe has welcomed over 9,433 people. Service and mission at work. This has resulted in £38,500 being raised, which the church has used and is using for mission within the Greater Alloa area and beyond. The community garden is thriving, producing fresh quality ingredients for the garden to table menu, and this community project has brought together local organisations and volunteers from all walks of life. St Mungo's is involved in mission activities that have traction, sustainability and regularity. They do not only sound impressive on paper, they are impressive. Our congregation continues to grow, adding 14 new members during lockdown, with another 8 new members this month. We have become a church without walls because we have been a church without halls since 1994. We have had to use our imagination and be creative in our solutions. St Mungo's has a vision for our sanctuary which will maintain the integrity of the space while offering flexibility. Funding has already been pledged to realise this vision. Regrettably, the Session Clerk of Ludgate has indicated that the congregation of Ludgate has doubts as to whether there would be a successful vote for our current minister in his unrestricted charge to be the minister of the proposed new United Church. For the final decision to rest solely on the AMBA score seems to be a fait accompli in favour of Ludgate. Where will the motivation on their part be to participate in serious dialogue when they are assured to retain their building by doing nothing? In essence, this puts money and building before the mission of the church. We wish to politely but strongly disagree with the Strategy Committee's suggestion that the Ludgate building be kept and St Mungo's be disposed of if the two churches should unite. It may be expected that the Strategy Committee suggests that equipment can easily be moved from one site to another. However, the people, the heart, and future revenues are not so easily transferable. We believe that St Mungo's is in both mission and finance the stronger church of the two. We invite Presbytery to weigh and judge this statement on the evidence of the works themselves. We also wish to remind Presbytery that the minister of St Mungo's was inducted on a basis of unrestricted charge, while understanding that this does not prevent progress in working together in a positive union. In conclusion, Moderator, St Mungo's cannot support the PMP as it currently stands, and I propose an amendment to the draft Presbytery Mission Plan in the following terms. Given the evidence of St Mungo's use of its existing sanctuary space for its mission that has created a steady stream of revenue, Presbytery agrees to extend the ongoing discussions between the congregations of Alloa St Mungo's and Alloa Ludgate to a period of 2 years, and that the issue of the disposability of the two buildings in the future date not to be based on AMBER scores alone. I have arranged that this proposed amendment will be seconded by Reverend Sangcha. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Any further debate? Okay. In which case, questions to the proposer or the convener? Maggie? People can't hear questions from the floor, Maggie.
Moderator Maggie Roderick, I'm sorry to keep asking questions, but I do have quite a lot of questions in my mind. What I would like to ask the proposer is, given that you've just said something to the effect of the fact that the second last sentence or something that was about you would continue to have discussions?
Oh, we also wish to remind that the Minister is unrestricted charge. However, we understand that that doesn't prevent discussion happening.
Right.
To work together.
Thank you. Yeah, so what we are being told as a presbytery is that although the Minister has unrestricted tenure, it doesn't preclude discussions. However, that does appear to be somewhat at odds with the Facebook entry from the said Minister, who more or less said very openly that he'd got unrestricted tenure, and it didn't quite say Yahoo, shucks to you, but that was the effect. How do these two things square, please?
Thank you, Maggie. I'm not sure that the convener or the proposer can speak for the Minister's Facebook contributions, but it's there. Yeah, I'm not denying it. Okay. Any other discussion, question or debate? In which case, no. In which case, can the convener respond, please?
The other amendment is contradictory.
Well, we are, yes, sorry, you're correct, my mistake. We now have an amendment which contradicts that, and will take the two against each other from Ludgate, Alrose. Thanks, Stuart, my mistake.
Yes, moderator, presbyters, Val Rose speaking as Presbytery Elder of Alloa Ludgate Church. The amendment that we'd like to put before Presbytery is that in the section of the report entitled Area F, the second paragraph be deleted and replaced with the original version as presented to the last Presbytery meeting. I can read you out those in detail if they want. The first one is quite a long paragraph, and maybe I should do that anyway. So the paragraph as it is in the revised Presbytery plan reads as such. In anticipation of the future union, the congregations of Alloa Ludgate and Alloa St Mungo's are to meet to consider the future use of buildings. This can be facilitated by Presbytery should the congregations feel that this would be beneficial. Presbytery affirms that it is minded to use the Amber assessment, which has scored the Ludgate facilities to a higher level than St Mungo's. The congregations are invited to bring forward a plan within 1 year of the approval of the plan. Should no agreement be reached by the Presbytery based on the Amber rating, will implement its current view that the Ludgate Church complex be the place of worship for the united congregation. No significant expenditure is to be incurred on the church buildings other than the maintenance of the envelope to ensure it's wind and watertight and to comply with any health and safety matters until a future plan is devised and approved by Presbytery. Consequently, both buildings are being given a B category as an interim measure. Presbytery encourages the congregations to consider the possibility of a fresh expressions of church to be located in the planned parish, which will have an identified area of multiple deprivation, which can be facilitated with the release of funds from the sale of one of the current buildings. This paragraph replaced the original version of the plan which was presented to the conference, the Presbytery Conference, and that originally said, at the union of Alloa Ludgate and Alloa St Mungo's, the St Mungo's building should be disposed of with a united congregation basing itself in the current Ludgate building, which is regarded as being better equipped and appointed to continue as the place of worship for the new congregation. We've heard already that historically, in Alloa, there's been, since the unification of the Church of Scotland in the 1930s, an anomaly of the two parish churches within 50 yards of each other. The nettle has not been grasped in the almost 100 years that this anomaly has been in existence. In the proposal of the first iteration of the Presbytery Mission Plan in June 22, Alloa Ludgate Church welcomed the clear message from the ad hoc committee based on the amber scores that there was a decision about which church was the most suitable to be kept as the sole place of worship. It cleared the decks so that meaningful discussion could take place on the important matters, which was how we as a church in Alloa and the area responds to the challenging circumstances of our parishes, and how we could look forward and plan together and look in imaginative ways in which we can respond as initially a united charge, and then looking at the formation of a team ministry which would also cover the parish of Tullibody. The revision proposed in the revised plan, we believe, muddies the water of this decision and only goes to kick the can down the road yet again. It is, sadly, but realistically, unlikely that the two neighbouring churches will come to a joint decision on buildings, whether it be a year or 5 years. Ultimately, it will be a decision of Presbytery, and it will revert to the amber score, with a process that has not healed but divided the churches even more. The plea of Ludgate Church is that we get on with the work, decide now about the eventual state of buildings, and get on with the work of uniting the congregations to take forward the mission of God.
Thank you, and thank you for noting that the bell also applies to the business convener. Okay, we have before us two amendments which are really diametrically opposed to one another. Sorry? You seconded, Val?
Yes, I have a seconder. Yes.
Sang?
Moderator Sang Yoon Cha, St. Mungo's Parish, Alloa. I promised my two lovely elders I would not speak tonight, but I have to say that the aspersions made against me, personally, that, I have to say, Scott McKenna and Graham, things have not been transparent at all. That which is transparent has been under the veil of confidentiality. I sit on the committee. I understand it. It would seem that I have a capacity to rattle people, moderator. I do. But my heart is in the right place. And I have to say that this overture cannot stand precisely because I believe that we have the better building. I do. I want to have an honest conversation with Ludgate, but to put the two churches in a fait accompli cannot stand for the thing we want to have worked out. I'm going to ask all the presbyters tonight to vote with us to ensure the fact that we have an honest conversation. I do not want to outmaneuver anyone at all. I want to have an honest conversation. And it would seem that, moderator, I have got certain people's rattled, and I have gotten their attention. And I have to say, moderator, on record, that I am the only person on the whole of the Church of Scotland who make a call and have £1 million in escrow today. But I don't want to do that. Escrow right now in this hour's time. I'm the only one. Yes, I've rattled some people and I've gotten their attention. Good. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you. Yes, you may, Don.
Presbyter Don Lane, Minister of Alloa Ludgate Church. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we as a congregation of Ludgate are about mission, not money. We have endeavoured to engage in dialogue with St Mungo's, which has not been terribly fruitful, because there's always been that edge of inconsistency with the discussions that we've had with the congregation. So I urge you to have listened and use your own judgment and what you see before you to make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other question or debate? In which case, convener. There are times when I'm so glad I'm the moderator and not the convener of this committee. Maybe not for long.
We have two very different views being expressed, both putting forward formal amendments to the plan. I'm not going to try and sway your view either way. I'm going to leave it to you to vote, because that's your responsibility. Whichever one survives your vote, then I'll respond to that one.
Sorry. Okay, we now come to the vote. Everybody's had their say. The vote is for the amendment in the name of St Mungo's and the... And then we take the next one, I was just going to say, for Ludgate. So can we take... Sorry. You may ask, questions are always in order.
Is this decision then seen that we vote for one church to close or the other? That seems to be what the convener said.
Is the decision that we vote for one church to close or the other? The decision is as the two amendments are before you, which is Ludgate and St Mungo's is that we continue debate. Ludgate's amendment is that we go with the plan as originally drafted and that we choose Ludgate. That's my understanding of the situation.
Yep, my understanding, convener, of this perhaps helps. We have two different views being expressed. We can't agree to both of them. Before we can debate one of them, we need to choose between the two that are being presented. So at the moment, we are choosing either to accept or listen to or engage with St Mungo's amendment or Ludgate's. So you're basically voting one against the other. Once we have picked one, then we need to debate whether we wish to actually go with that plan in the plan.
Thank you. So, taking the amendment from St Mungo's first, given the evidence of St Mungo's use of its existing sanctuary space for its mission that has created a steady revenue stream, Presbytery agrees to extend the ongoing discussions between the congregations of Alloa St Mungo and Alloa Ludgate to a period of 2 years, and that be the issue of the disposability of the two buildings in the future date, not to be based on the AMBA scores alone. Is that clear? Those voting for this amendment in the name of St Mungo's, please stand. Yes? You can abstain. Yeah, we are.
If I may offer some advice to Presbytery in response to David's question. At this point, we have two opposing motions, as it were. They are set against each other. People are invited to vote for one or for the other. The one with the most votes will pass then into the next stage of the debate, as the convener outlined. The one with the fewer votes will fall. So when you vote for one or the other, if you're voting for one, it's the one you want to go forward to the next vote, which is against what is actually stated in the draft mission plan.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Could we have the vote for this particular amendment in the name of St Mungo's once again? Okay, and those voting for the Ludgate one now too. So those voting for the amendment in the name of Ludgate, which is it is the union of Alloa Ludgate and Alloa St Mungo's, the St Mungo's building should be disposed of, with the united congregation basing itself on the current Ludgate building, which is regarded as being better equipped and an appointed building to continue to be the place of worship for the new congregation. So you're clear what you're voting on. Voting for this amendment in the name of Ludgate. I think it's fairly clear, but I think given the seriousness of this matter, I would rather take account and be absolutely clear, if you don't mind, ladies and gentlemen. To save Graham Nash the trouble of incurring my wrath. I hate you to feel underused. Sorry? Could you please stand if you're voting for this? Voting for St Mungo's. For a count. We always get Miss Kinloch, don't worry. Right. That's all the votes for the St Mungo's amendment counted. Okay, and for the one in the name of Ludgate, please stand. The impression has shifted. So they're voting for St Mungo's 15 and for Ludgate 20. So the amendment in the name of Ludgate carries. Now we put the amendment that stands to the Presbytery, but the convener may wish to respond.
We are facing probably the biggest crunch decision within the plan. It was recognised before a pen went to paper that this was always going to be a contentious matter to resolve. Perhaps we compromised too far by giving time. Perhaps we should have stuck with our original version and just pushed the grasping of the nettle. I find myself in the awkward position of understanding both positions, and I'm going to simply leave it to Presbytery to either grasp the nettle now or leave it for 12 months, and then you'll need to grasp the nettle then. That's the difference between, I think, our two positions. And I'm going to leave it for you to vote. So simply if you wish the amendment to be carried in accordance with the amendment, if the vote is there, we'll accept it.
Okay. Those wishing to support the amendment that's been carried, please stand. And those opposing it? I'm really sorry, folks. Given the importance and contentious nature of this, I really am going to call for another count. I think I know what way it goes, but I'm being ultra cautious in this one. Sorry? It was for the amendment, it's taking the amendment that stands, whether the Presbytery voting for it or against it. Okay?
I think, moderator, we happen to see the name of Ludgate.
It's the one in the name of Ludgate that's carried. We now have to vote as a Presbytery on it.
Can I offer?
Yep. Your sage counsel.
If I may, once again, what you are now being asked to vote on is for or against the amendment in the name of Ludgate, which is in effect an amendment to the proposition in the draft mission plan. So if you vote for the amendment, then it will carry. If you vote against it, you're essentially voting for what's in the print in the mission plan draft. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, voting for this amendment in the name of Ludgate, once again, with a count. Okay. Those voting against? Voting for the motion, just as well we took account, 17 and against 22. So the motion falls. So we revert to the plan as it is in the print, is my understanding. Thank you all. Right, moving on, we have an amendment now in the name of Jan Steen on behalf of Logie. Jan. Sorry, yes. Points of order always in order.
Scott Brown, Gartmore and Biclivy. Moderator, given the importance and the weightiness of the decisions we are taking and the fact that some of us have 25 miles to drive home, it's now 10 o'clock. And I move, Moderator, that we adjourn to continue this important debate at another time.
Is there a seconder for that? Is there a seconder? Okay. In which case, we take a vote, simply take a vote on it, I think, without any further ado. We adjourn or we don't adjourn. A vote to adjourn or a vote to continue. Those voting to adjourn. And those voting to continue? Oh, Lord, not another. I think we continue. Sorry, Scott. Thank you. But I think we're perhaps moving on to slightly less contentious issues. Jan.
Thank you, Moderator. Speaking on behalf of Logie, and I assure you I will be very short. Moderator, on behalf of Logie Kirk, I propose an amendment to the revised draft mission plan to change the building categorization of Logie as shown on page 38 from a B with an asterisk to an A, which means from non-essential to essential to the plan, and to delete paragraph specific to Logie on page 34. Moderator, very short. The decision of the proposal of the committee is based on the fact that Logie Church is, according to them, not in the community that they wish to serve. But, Moderator, Logie Kirk, yes, it's not within Causeway Head, but it serves a wide community of people coming from Bridge of Allen, Dunblane, Causeway Head, Blair Logie, Menstrie, Allawa, Stirling, and other places. And that, on that base, Moderator, we would like to ask you to change the plan and make Logie Kirk essential to our mission plan rather than non-essential. I move.
Have you a seconder?
I have a seconder.
Thank you. Any questions? Or any discussion? Okay.
Gary McIntyre, Minister of St Ninian's Old. Moderator, I have had the privilege of being interim moderator of Logie Kirk on 2 occasions. I therefore know the people and I know the building in which they worship. Logie Kirk is in exceptionally good condition. It does not, when compared to many other buildings, cost much to maintain. And there is a loyal and dedicated congregation which meets all its commitments, both locally and to the national church. While, of course, we cannot afford to keep all our buildings, and that is acknowledged, it surely makes no sense whatsoever to close a building that is in such good condition and which is not a drain on the congregation's or the wider church's finances. Moderator, to put it succinctly, if Presbytery rejects the amendment and continues to go ahead with the planned closure of Logie Kirk building, there will inevitably and understandably be a loss of members, and with that, a loss of income to the church as a whole. What is more, the Church of Scotland, through this presbytery, will be seen to be acting in a way that takes no cognizance of the wishes of those members and others who generously give of their time, talents and money for the sake of the kingdom, and it will do irreparable damage to the standing of the Church of Scotland in the wider community and beyond. For this reason and more, I second the amendment that Logie Kirk be reclassified as A, and I urge the Presbytery to vote for the amendment. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Any other contributions? I don't see anybody moving. Convener?
Unfortunately, in the terms that the amendment has been presented, I don't feel I could support it. Because you're asking us not only to, say, give you more time to consider a plan and enter into conversation, you're basically asking us to not review the decision at all. We just let it go. Logie is untouchable. Sorry, there's no congregation that's untouchable, we'll have to say. Had the representatives from Logie asked for a longer period of time to really enter into, go into detail about a plan and convince us of the missional heart of that building in their work in the community, then I would have agreed to it. They do make a lot about, you know, it's a beautiful place, and it is. I've been there, I've buried folk there. They make about great car parking. It is. The last time I was there was a whole host of cyclists using it, we were trying to bury somebody, which was unhelpful. But there you go. These things happen. The assumption is that people can just drive there. Everybody got a car. Everybody got access to a car. Everybody afford to run a car, the way fuel costs are going. Is it a reasonable assumption to make? These are the issues we want to engage with Logie about. And because of that is just being avoided, I don't feel that I can support and agree to the amendment as it is written. And so I have to resist that amendment in the name of the committee as it stands.
Okay, thank you, Convener. In which case we come to vote on the amendment, and it's a straightforward, if anything, straightforward tonight, for the amendment in the name of Logie Kirk or against the amendment. Those for the amendment, please stand. Okay, those against, please stand. I think we have a pretty clear majority against. So in which case the amendment falls. Okay?
If I may, Convener?
Yeah.
As a compromise, I'm prepared to offer an amendment for the acceptance of Presbytery to extend the review period to 2 years. Not just for Logie, but for Clackmannan and Fillin as well, to give them more time, and Lecropt as well, to give them more time to engage and to talk and to plan. If Presbytery is so minded, I would be happy to make that amendment.
Thank you very much, Convener.
I haven't arranged the seconder, moderator.
Third and fourth and fifth. Okay. We have an amendment that actually embraces 3 congregations: Logie, Lecropt, Clackmannan and Fillin. So 4. Now we have amendments. We have an amendment in the name of Fillin. Would this amendment of the conveners be acceptable to Fillin? Okay. So it's not a modification of your amendment. Would it be acceptable to Clackmannan? Who I don't think I've formally got an amendment in, but it would be acceptable to Clackmannan. Yes. Okay, thank you. Gary, last but not least, Lecropt. Sorry? Perfectly acceptable. In which case, there's an amendment that's acceptable to all others who are making amendments. So can I put the convener's amendment to the Presbytery for the vote? For the amendment, now in the name of the convener, and decisively seconded. Okay, thank you. Please sit. And those against the amendment in the name of the convener? I demand a... No. It clearly stands. The amendment stands, convener. Thank you. Okay. That is you. We now move to the... We have dealt with all the amendments. And Gary? I thought we dealt with your amendment in Lecropt. No. All right, this is something different. I'm asking for further information, not further time. Okay, come forward. We will be.
As I just earlier on, like Croft, maybe we're a bit slow in the uptake, but we're just appealing for a bit more detail from the ad hoc committee as to why they have made their decision that Croft is not well appointed. Just detail, specifics, A, B, C, D, and E, so that we go into our now 2 years, thank you to the convener, fully, I'm going to say armed, that's the wrong word, full with all information so that we can speak to the General Trustees, the Presbytery and the Stirling family and the like. So it's basically to just add in to the beginning of the paragraph on page 35, Presbytery commits to helping the Kirk session and congregation to understand why it's come to the opinion that Croft A-listed blah, 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 blah. I'll read that again. Presbytery commits to helping the Kirk session and congregation of Croft understand why it's come to the opinion that Croft is not well appointed. Blah, 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 blah. Does that mean you want to write?
Okay. So it's really supplementing the convener's amendment with a request for more detailed information. And
sounds ideal to me.
Is that seconded? Yes. Thank you. Convener.
I don't think that's contentious. I think we'd be happy to talk and try and explain and explore and journey with the congregation through this challenging phase of their life. So I'm quite happy to accept that.
It adds structure and direction to the discussions of the 2 years.
Yeah.
So, is that acceptable to Presbytery? Thank you. I don't think we're going to bother asking you to stand. Okay. In which case we come to, I think that's the end of all the amendments. We now come to the vote on the report itself, and the clerk's going to advise us how we're going to vote. Not what we're going to vote, but the process. Is it written vote? Sorry. Nobody else wishes to speak? Nobody? Right.
Do I get to close?
You get to close.
This has been one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. I know you all hate me. That's okay. I know there are effigies of me hanging from lampposts in various communities. That's okay, I can take it. I'm a grown-up. I'm Faye Dundee, we've got brass necks, we're all right. I did this in Falkirk, but this has been much more challenging. I have lost sleep. I've lost hair. I might even have lost a bit of weight worrying about this. None of us involved in the committee involved in preparing this did so lightly. We knew the pain and the hurt that this would cause. But we were fulfilling the instruction of the General Assembly that we approved as representatives of the Church through the Assembly in the Mission Plan Act. I thank those who have contributed to the conversations tonight and to the debate for their courtesy and the grace and the gentleness with which they've handled each other. It is appreciated, and I thank you all very much. And as soon as I can get out of this convenership, I'm off.
Thank you, Stuart. We're now asked to vote on the report as a whole, the plan as a whole, draft plan. If it's accepted, it becomes the Presbytery's plan, in which case it's then sent to the Assembly Committee for their approval. And the clerk will take us through the process. Yes?
We move to a secret ballot by voting paper. Again, only full members of Presbytery may vote at this point. To receive your ballot paper, you're invited to come forward. Ministers on this side, elders and deacons on that side, and Ed and I will take your name and hand you a ballot paper. Please mark your paper for or against approval of the draft mission plan as it has been amended and in the print. And it's put it into the box, the shoebox, which is on the piano on my left. Once everyone has voted, the tellers will come forward and they will count the votes and let us know, and moderator will announce the result. Are there any questions?
Yes, we've got a question. Oh, yes? A cross or a tick, either will be acceptable. And it's Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak. Which is not, neither, I'm not going to make my political views known tonight. So vote it. If you come forward, collect your voting papers from the clerks. Stuart's front of the queue. You bet. Good evening again. There voted for the mission plan 53, against 14, and there were no spoiled papers. So, therefore, I declare that the mission plan has been passed by the Presbytery of Stirling, and it will now be passed on to the Presbytery Mission Planning Task Group in Edinburgh. So thank you all for your time and attention tonight. I know it's been a long meeting, but it's been a vitally important meeting. I know it's not a meeting that anybody should regard with triumph, and a few will regard with profound disappointment. We're sensitive towards that, but we do continue on our journey together. And not only if we're disappointed, but we do have to make this plan work. This is only a starting point for something that has the potential to be very fruitful and productive and new. So thank you very much for your time. And thank you to Stuart. He's not been a convener for desperately long, but boy, it feels like it. My wife kindly pointed out that I've got more grey hair than when I became moderator. Goodness knows what Stuart's wife was saying. So thank you all very much. Let us pray. Oh no, we haven't finished yet. We've got 2 items of business. So, letters and communications.
None, moderator.
Good. Notices of motion.
None.
Good. Date of the next meetings. Thursday the 8th of September 2022 at 6:48. September? Honest, I'm saying Thursday the 8th of September is when I'm turning up to ordain Ruth Kennedy in the Cathedral at 6:45, and Thursday the 6th of October at 7 p.m. for the conduct of ordinary business. And the hour of 10:30, whatever, we now adjourn. I invite you to stand. Let us pray. It has been a long and demanding and a difficult night, and some will have sleepless nights in the light of the decisions made. Some will have tough decisions ahead of them, but we are all on a road of discipleship and love. Help us to work together with one another with sensitivity, understanding, and compassion, with hearts always above all else for Christ and his gospel and the people in the world he would have us serve, the world he loved so much that God gave his only Son. Give us now peace and hope and love. And may the blessing of God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit rest upon you and all you remember in love, this night and always. Amen.